saw it. I'll turn it back on.
I wouldn't touch it.
No, I had turned it off earlier because I knew you wouldn't want to run it.
Could everybody please rise and join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have several items on the agenda this morning, so I thought we would start off with Adam and his report.
You guys have basically first and second quarter numbers in front of you. June was based on par with last year, 188 for the month. When you factor in our community health visits, we're up to 273. Just for the 911s, we're averaging about 6.5 a day. Times of the month are better than average. I was pretty happy with all our time averages. 0.85 minutes from dispatch in or out, then 21.71 for our dropping off the back in service. So my goal for that is 20, so we're pretty close there. Everything else is pretty much, we had quite a few refusals for the month, so we don't bill for any of those. So we're eating a big chunk there. PR events are definitely kicking up. July will be really heavy, especially with the fair. There are several nights of the fair that I'm putting on a extra truck. So Saturday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, I'll have an additional crew, so I'll have 4 crews out there. Friday night, I'll actually have 5 crews. Plus, we are doing a medical tent, so we're getting a entire, I think it's 60 by 40, a very large tent set up as basically a mobile ER out at the fairgrounds. So we'll have lots of medical staff out there this go around. Community classes, we just got done with an EMR class, emergency medical responders, so added quite a few first responders into the district as well as a couple other area. We just started this week, we're going to start a first responder class for NAL. They had 17 people they wanted to send through that, so we're doing a class for them. And then this fall, on top of doing our high school EMT class, we also got approved to do a first responder class for the underclassmen. So starting sophomores and juniors, they will take a first responder class. We got that syllabus approved through IDPH and Department of Education. So excited about that. So I've got an educator that'll be out there pretty much 8 to noon about every day teaching EMT and EMR classes.
So this will all take place at the high school?
This is. And we do offer, it'll take place here, but it is offered up to area high schools. So Crispin, Shiloh, Kansas, Martinsville, and Marshall, it was all offered to. I do believe we had a couple outside students take us up on that. So I'm excited to grow that. Report, like I said, is about the same. If there's any information you guys have questions on, feel free to ask. We had quite a few helicopters in this month. We had a lot of critical patients, so it's been a busy month.
Any questions? Thank you, Adam. Garmon is here this morning, and they wish to talk to you briefly to introduce themselves, and they were here just to collect information. They're a construction management firm, and so guys, you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'm Brian Koistra. This is Lance Gassler. We're both vice presidents with Garmon Construction, located just across the border in Terre Haute. Big part of our business, the last 5 or 6 years has been county jails. We built 15, 16 maybe here in the last few years. Know you're in the throes of possibly one, and really here just to introduce ourselves, probably speak when spoken to, and just make ourselves available and gather whatever information we can. So just happy to be here and happy to answer any questions.
They're affiliated with Ralph, who took us through the jail.
Well, I was going to say, Ralph's been here before.
Yes.
Yes,
Right.
several times.
Right.
Ralph's been our boss and mentor, and
Okay. Right.
For the last 20 plus years.
Mhm.
So
He was originally going to be here. I was out of town. In fact, I was out of country, and I didn't get a chance to respond to him quick enough. He's on his way to Florida. Poor guy. So, at any rate, so, thank you, gentlemen. Also, we have a representative of CORE here this morning. If you'd like to, I know you're helping them, but if you want to introduce yourself, seems only
I'm Tim Erickson, I'm the president of CORE, out of Peoria. We've been working out here with Harris the last couple of years, done a few projects for the labor's development and such. But a large firm, national company, number 2 municipal public safety builder in the country. So, just want to listen about the project and learn more about it. Thank you.
Thank you for all of you being here. We appreciate the interest, and hopefully we'll need your help and advice. And is this, okay.
Hi,
Hey, Stacy.
hi. I'm Stacy with Hopes and Dreams. Just getting up to speed on summer food.
Sure, can you talk to us just casually this
Yeah.
morning a little bit? Okay, why don't you
Please.
have a seat up here and let Stacy talk so she can get back to her
Oh,
business.
sorry. I don't know what questions you have. Kids are not showing up. We went 2 years where food was delivered right to their door. They loved that. 200 plus kids daily were fed. Now that they have to actually take the initiative to show up to be fed, not so much. We were initially serving at the drop-in center, which is owned by Hopes and Dreams at 208 East Court Street. And we have a bus route going. Michelle has someone who drives daily. There were days that no one was getting on the bus. We have, I think there's 6 different stops, if not maybe even 8. And the times were posted for the kiddos to get on the bus. They knew where it was and not getting on. That has picked up a little bit. He has at least 5 kids a day. I just got off the phone with Michelle actually just to confirm they're still getting on the bus. We have moved to, because they were cooking it on the tracks, bringing it to the drop-in center, cut out the middleman, now they're serving directly on the tracks. So if somebody even came in with their family and wanted to eat, they could offer them the free lunch for anyone under the age of 18. Numbers are still about the same, maybe 10 a day. We are providing lunch at the rec center, but that's part of their summer camp. So there's about anywhere from 60 to 80 kids being fed there daily. Again, prepared by On the Tracks and delivered. We're buying our supplies at DI Supply, as far as plates and things, that sort of thing. It is offered, it's available, and that's the best you can do. So.
Have you talked to Amanda recently?
Within
In the
last few weeks, yeah.
Now, up there, they're not delivering either in Douglas County, correct?
I don't believe so, but we've not talked about their number.
I'm just curious what their numbers, whether, that is.
I would say it's probably fluctuated everywhere, but it's really disheartening.
Right.
But that's just the nature of the.
And the other thing was, I don't know if you're to the point where you have a feel for if and how much you're gonna need from us.
I know that we are paying $100 a week to Michelle for busing. And I just did the quick math, I think we're 9 weeks total, other than the 4th of July. So she's not gonna bill us until she's all done, because I said if you need paid now, you just let us know and we'll pay you. We've spent $384 and some change at DI Supply. That will probably, we'll go until the 29th of this month. Is that the Friday? Yeah, the 29th. So I'm estimating another couple $100 there, and then busing. So I would say less than $2,000 for those things.
Busing's pretty cheap, isn't it?
Yes, it's really cheap.
I was gonna say.
Good
that's-
people.
Yeah, how's
Yeah.
it- how's
Yeah,
that?
I don't even know how that's covering our fuel, so.
You can thank Michelle for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you have any questions?
Well, I guess, as far as getting participation, last year, obviously, we had 200 kids. This year, 5 kids. Someone needs to talk to the people that made that decision for next year to think reassess their decision
Right.
to maybe make it where we can deliver.
I think if it was a program where they could drop them off at 9 in the morning and leave them there until noon,
Right.
but then somebody has to pay to man that. And at Hopes and Dreams, I mean, we are solely volunteers.
Right.
And I went into this, be a school counselor so I can have my summers off.
The sad-
I need a minute.
The sad thing, when we first started this, I helped deliver those things. I spent several hours doing that,
Yes,
and I'd go by later in the day, I'd just.
the same food was
and
hanging on the
food sitting
door.
on step, they didn't go get it.
Right, I did the
What-
same.
So what are we saying? Are we saying that the parents are not responsible, or what, they won't walk 5 feet to pick it up?
They
Well,
may
you
not
can
be
be
up
nice
yet.
about it, but I don't have to be, so.
Sometimes their hours are a little different than mine. Maybe they're not up
Hours,
yet.
they don't go anywhere, they're all.
They don't
on the
get out
Or
till
phone.
they're
1 or
not there,
2.
the kids don't go open the
Yeah.
door and get it.
Yeah,
Well,
Yeah.
I just sit there right by the screen door, mama's sitting right in front
Yeah,
of the TV and
that's
they don't
right.
It's a
move.
little hard.
and it's not up to their,
Sad.
maybe that's not what they wanted, so they just leave.
But I heard that complaint last
Yes.
year that a lot of the meals were not being used.
Yeah.
They were just.
Right.
being
So
lazy.
comparing the numbers isn't even really that accurate.
Right.
Yeah. but-
I would say if you're delivering 200, I would say maybe 150 were being consumed, and that's generous. So,
Well, thank you for all of
You're
the work
welcome.
that you have
Try.
done to
You're
be
trying.
able to manage this.
And-
I think-
and
I
I
don't
know that
think you can
really-
do any more
yeah.
now.
and next year, we hope that it's all under our control. Then we would be able to, through some grant money, pay somebody to run it directly out of our, and maybe make some changes that will bring in some more kiddos. But all you can do is offer it.
So anyway, to figure, I mean, can the schools identify who these kids are? I mean, and so that maybe.
Absolutely, because they're,
Easily.
well, and the numbers are a little skewed because everyone's on free and reduced lunch currently. I think that will stop for the next school year. That was part of the COVID relief things, everybody had free and reduced lunch. That's going to change. Absolutely, we can identify those families.
But
through
somehow
free
you
and
can
reduced.
get it into those kids' hands.
You do.
Sometime.
I mean, you,
That they
Yes.
need to be the ones, because
Yes.
obviously you can't count on.
and, you know, we
I don't
even, I
know.
mean, just through a Google Doc, and to me, that's asking a lot of somebody else to understand how to use a Google Doc. Don't have that, not, you know, that's just, to me, that's a business thing, not a everyday thing. But anyway, even with that, we had 27 people sign up. So adults signed up 27 children, but 3 are showing up consistently,
Are
so.
these, the kids that you were talking about eating at the rec, are those the same kids that are there every day? for-
Yes, the camp kids.
So
Because I take those kids everywhere,
Mhm,
and, well, other than driving you crazy,
mhm.
they're not the type that you're really
Need,
looking for.
exactly, they're not our
Those-
target
Those
audience.
kids have parents that are,
Absolutely, they can pay for their
Well-to-do.
lunch, right. But because currently they qualify for free and reduced,
how they do that.
at the state, everybody did,
Oh, yeah, never mind, I know.
yeah.
We'll hang in there with
Okay.
you.
Keep plugging
I
along.
appreciate
Plug
you
my
doing
night.
what you're doing.
No,
Just
thank
giving
you
it a
guys, we
shot.
appreciate you.
Okay, we have the next item we have is Klinger is gonna make a presentation. I would like to preface it to say that everything that is put before you may not be exactly the way it winds up. So we had to draw a line in the sand, right, Michael, and say, this is where we're at, so things can change, so. Michael, please take it away. I want to introduce you
So,
folks to
I'll
make sure.
introduce myself. So I'm Michael Freeze. I'm the head of architecture for Klinger and Associates. It's wonderful to see the ladies and gentlemen from the board again. I also have with me my partner architect, Sean Harding from HMN Architects. And then one of my architecture interns, Silas Boone, is with me today as well. And so as Jeff had mentioned, we're here to present an update of where we're at in the process. And so, you know, we've been working on this for a while. And so I kind of took the chance to go back and look at our original agreement, because this is a co-effort with Coles County Regional Planning on this. And so we were asked at the very beginning of this to look at the Vance School site, which you see up here at the screen, as at the time, that was the site that was determined we'd like to be able to look at for a county jail. And so we'll show you the latest county jail plan, which is very similar to when a small group of us, including some of your building and grounds guys, sat down and met earlier, just only 3-4 weeks ago. It's very recent. And the budget to that as well. And then, interestingly enough, as I was reading through this, what our original deliverable date was to be finalized and ready to present in the end of August. And here we are in the beginning of July, and we're able to kind of tell you our basic conclusions about what to do about at the Vance site. In addition, recently, as some of you probably are aware, there was 2 other properties that were discussed adjacent to the Vance School about how we could potentially try and maximize the construction that could happen here. And so those 2 properties happen to be the ones to the north. We have a residential property here and then the Coca-Cola property here off to the side. And so what we're gonna be presenting to you is the floor plan, the site plan, and then the current budget for what it would be to put a county jail on this property, or what we're gonna say is this combination of 3 properties. That's in our recommendation. So what was a responsibility of ours was to provide a final recommendation for the type of jail that fits your needs based upon meeting with the sheriff and board members, and then to also put that onto a site and determine a budget. And so that's what we'll be presenting today. Now, we've also done technical soil borings for structural analysis of the soil, and we've done a bunch of environmental research out here on the site. Those reports are quite lengthy, and half of them are written in Greek, in my opinion. I'm just an architect, but sometimes I have a hard time remembering all those different terminologies in there. We're not going to be presenting those lengthy reports to you. We've already presented those to the board, and we'll certainly in the final package present all that to you. We thought in the interest of time, let's present the most important things here. And so what I have to pass out is 3 things. We'll pass out the floor plan and the site plan here. Sean, if you want to add something, by all means, go right ahead and jump in.
There's also a needs assessment that we will refer back to, that was not mentioned, that you guys had paid for a needs assessment that.
And so I actually have a big printout over the report of doing the Vance School building, looking at that particular building for reuse. And so this floor plan here that's dated June 17th, I'll give you a copy. And, copy here for Mr. Newspaper Man. Sure. So the report, we went through Vance, I'll talk about the report, and I'll let Sean talk about the floor plan and the site plan. So in the architectural report, you'll see there's some paper involved in this. We went through Vance very thoroughly, looking at how we can address the building for remodeling to be used. The original thought was could part of the jail functions be located into Vance? Or could we also use Vance for other county needs, maybe some other county offices? And so in our analysis, part of our contract was to look at the building, do an existing building analysis of it, what's the construction, how's the construction holding up? Because that building was built, I believe, in between 1910 and 1950. So it's onwards of 100 years old. In general, in both of our shared professional opinion, the building's in very good shape for a building of that age. Obviously, there's some defects with the roof where you have a little bit of water coming in. There's some shingles that need to be replaced. And there's, just like buildings, bodies get old, buildings get old. We get old pains and aches and so forth. The building has a few aches and pains up on the upper portions of the east and west roof. If you not, the upper walls above the 2 entrances, you notice there's steel tie-back plates up there. And those were put in because some of the walls, based upon the way it was constructed, the walls weren't necessarily tied to the building frame. So they're kind of leaning out, like we all tend to lean over in age and so forth. And so they started to put some steel bracing in to help correct that posture of the building to bring that building up into squareness. So we've identified those things, but in general, we feel that building is in very good health and can be remodeled and reused. All the windows have been replaced. Most of the asbestos, from what we can visually observe, has been removed from all the pipe insulation. And we were not asked to do an asbestos inspection of the building, but most of the construction in that building, from my understanding looking at it, it was designed to be used as an elementary school. The people using it right now have not modified anything really to the building, besides use it to store their stuff. Stuff. And there's a lot of stuff in it. But, that's fine. They wanted to buy the building for that use, so they're using it to that effect. This building, the existing mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, what has been remodeled has been done probably in like the 90s, so it's about a 30-year time frame. And so we'd recommend that, redoing a new use in the building, let's go ahead and upgrade everything at one time. If you're gonna be building a brand new building, you'd be building brand new mechanical, electrical, plumbing anyway. There's a host of, you can say, well, there's lots of Cat 6 data wiring, can't we go reuse some of that? Well, that's all snaked around, and any electrician would be pulling their ears out trying to figure out how to reuse some of that existing infrastructure in place. Structurally, besides the two upper walls of the building is very solid. There is not much for masonry repairs to be done besides those areas that I identified. So in general, the building had been well maintained by the school district. Now, the one significant thing it's lacking is in accessibility. In 1910, accessibility for ADA was not something people thought about. So the building does not have an elevator. It has two internal stairways, both of which were enclosed to make them fire protected at some point. There is an external fire escape stair on the south side of the building. And so to bring in an accessible elevator, we can go try and carve it out of the inside of the building. Or we actually think, Sean and I agree, because of the fire escape doors on the outside, it would actually be probably easier to build an addition on the outside of the building, on the south side, and use those doors as the way to get into the building. And then we can keep the elevator separate from that, or within that addition, and handle it that way. So that's how we can address those issues. Other major issues in the architectural analysis that we identified was, talking about accessibility, remodeling. Your existing courthouse, if you're going to be putting offices in there, those classrooms are very large, generous sized classrooms, and many of your offices in the different quadrants of the courthouse are very similar open concepts. So it should be very conducive to allow some county offices to relocate, whether they come from the county annex building or anything of that nature. The one thing that we were not able to do inside the building is to locate anything of an essential nature. Okay, so the building code defines essential facilities as facilities that, buildings that house important functions are related to disaster events. So a police station, fire station, obviously a sheriff's department, those are all facilities that are by code mandated to be stronger, more robust buildings. So in the event of a seismic event, which Illinois is in a seismic zone, tornado, if there's any other, couple other disaster type scenarios, these buildings are meant to stand so that way the occupants inside can go out and assist with the disaster relief. Also, buildings with a higher life safety risk, such as a hospital or those institutions, those are designed to be more robust so that way the occupants who are mostly incapacitated or can't move on their own are protected. So a jail also kind of falls in that category because you have people who are locked in for a reason. You don't want them out. And so therefore we have to design the building to be a little more robust. The Vance School, and so how does that apply to the Vance School? Back in 1915 when they built the Vance School, those masonry walls, which are about 20 inches thick, are brick, but there's no steel reinforcing like we put in modern day masonry buildings. And so what it means, it's just the bricks and the mortar there. So in the event of a seismic event, it doesn't have the reinforcing in it that could keep it from wanting to topple over. So one time we looked about putting dispatch in the basement, and once we got into the building and started to realize what we're looking at, like, we really can't put dispatch because we don't want to have the risk of the building raining down on dispatch. Now, we could try it hard in an area for dispatch inside the building. We could try and make it structurally, build a little bunker inside, but we didn't feel that was cost effective to do. So for the jail layout, and you'll see this on the site plan that we have, we're locating the jail a little bit away from Vance School. And the reason is, in case of a seismic event where Vance would start to tip or fall down, we don't want that raining a ton of bricks down the top of the jail because of the jail's importance and the sheriff's office importance. So those were kind of the two noted things. So that at one point in time, we looked at trying to connect Vance onto the building, and after looking at it further, we decided that was probably not going to be in our best interest to do so. So that's why the two are separated. And also, just from a programmatic function, if one's intended to be the jail and the sheriff's office, you really want that to be able to run independent of your county government building if that's how you choose to reduce Vance. There's a picture of Notre Dame, so I apologize. Screensaver popped up. Any questions on the architectural evaluation? The other thing that we've identified in there, so at the end you get to the conclusion, we state that we feel the building can be reused depending upon how you want to remodel it and how you want to invest in it. We're thinking at this point that could be somewhere in a $4 to $5 million cost. Now, if you were to tear the building down, you're going to bear the cost of demolition, and you can build a smaller construction and so forth. So you could be in about that $3 million range, depending upon what we choose to do. And we really haven't talked a lot of scenarios on what a new building would be like to do that. So that is pretty much there. You also find in the architectural evaluation, I'm starting to use this as our main document that we're going to be presenting to Coles County here in the not too distant future, because we understand that we still want to finish their process. And so as far as the bond part, is that something we can address? So we know that the Coles County process with the USDA loan, that's a lengthy time process, and we're ready to start presenting our documentation to them, but they have time, and USDA takes time to review things. And this board, it's our understanding, you're concerned about the rising inflation costs. Now everything is going up in price, and so you kind of took action upon yourselves to look at an alternative funding source through using bonds at a local, your local banking institutions, which Sean and I felt were great. And I think one of the reasons you're able to do that is because you already have a public safety tax in place. So that's given you some of the means to do so. And so that kind of put a little bit of urgency on to try and get up and go with this process so we can get you on to the next stage. So the other thing you'll see in this architectural evaluation we're talking about is when we looked at the two different sites, how those sites give us more space to fit in the building on site for the new jail, but also to give you the parking that you're going to need. We did identify that in the environmental analysis, there was, at the Coca-Cola building, there's an underground storage tank there. And then across the street to the south, I apologize, that was me leaving that out. Across the street from Vance, here to the south, there's a building that had an underground storage tank. And so we went out and did additional environmental soil borings for you, and those results came back that no contamination has come over to the Vance site from those two buried tanks. And so that's a very good thing. So the site's clean. They did also find, when we added in the scope, the residential property and the Coke building, there's a small underground tank in the center of the Coke building. When they would empty out oil, apparently they would just dump it into a tank. So there's a tank there as well, but right now the soil boring that we did said there's no levels of contaminants on the site above Illinois standards, or well below. So we don't feel that impacts. And the residential property, there was a small tank in the backyard. And again, nothing has come up on the boring that says you've seen any contamination. So what we would advise to you, and you'll see that in the report, is for the residential property, if you choose to purchase that, part of the agreement is that property owner needs to take care of that cleanup, if cleanup's required. There was nothing on record saying that tank is there. We saw a vent coming out of the ground that would typically be suspect of a tank being there. When we talked to the Coca-Cola property owner, he mentioned when he bought the building from Coke, in their purchase agreement, there was going to be, Coca-Cola was going to remain responsible for cleaning up the property. And he said, nothing's happened in 20 years, and he's ironically, Coke called me up like 2 months ago asking about, how can we start this cleanup process? And we think what happened is when our environmental engineer was going to Illinois EPA, the file had gotten forgotten, and so when we asked to request the file, it got red flagged, and so Coke is now working again with the property owner on that. So we would also suggest that if you're going to buy the Coca-Cola property building, you write it in your agreement that Coca-Cola still remains responsible for the cleanup, because that's not something you'd want to bear. One last thing is there's an old service station for those of you who are familiar with Paris, right across the street from the residential property. On the phase 1 assessment for the house, that came up clean, so it's our understanding the tanks that were there were removed and cleanup was done at that time. So generally the site is what we would consider a site that would be buildable for you. You don't have any environmental concerns that we've been able to identify at this point. On the soil bearing analysis, as we did all the structural soil borings, we determined the site soil, it's consistent amongst all 3 properties, which is good, because there's times when new buildings get built that bring in extra dirt, different kinds of dirt. The soil remained very consistent, and the soil bearing capacity, so what that means is how much weight the soil can carry. It's a little lower than average, and so in order to compensate for that, we'd have to put in a concrete footing a little bit larger to spread out the weight. So if you think about, going back to a body analysis, your footing is like the feet at the bottom of the ground that keeps you from sinking in. This building just needs bigger feet so it doesn't sink in so much. And so that's very doable, and we were pleased to see that we didn't have any high volume change materials. So what that means is we didn't find any clay that once it gets a little bit of water, it swells up and then shrinks. Imagine that shrinking and swelling is really heck on a building, that's going to get a lot of cracks and settlement differentially happening. So in general, this site has been, we believe, in our opinions, it's a good site for you. One of the other benefits of the site is that we have access to both Main Street and Central Avenues. As you know, in your own town, you have the one-way going north and the one-way going south. Each one of those sites comes with a driveway already onto the county highway, or excuse me, the state highway, so that's very conducive. And so on our site plan that we presented to you, we're reusing those driveways to that advantage.
There would be a process of asking the state for a curb cut.
Mhm.
Sometimes that's a very simple process, sometimes it's a complicated process. So we wanted to make use of what was there and avoid some of those headaches.
The other advantage to this here in town is we have utilities inside town here already. So that's been great for us. So through the center of the site, right through here, going to the Coca-Cola building, there's a 3-phase aerial power line. And so for both the new jail and the remodeling advance, you have 3-phase power already out there. Most of the modern buildings are using phase 3 power for the equipment. And so that's great to have that out there on site. You already have obviously city sewer and city water running by. And there's also the gas hub is right, actually across the street right out there. And so we got, for all the main utilities that we need to bring, electrical power, gas, water, sewer, we have those here. The new building would need to be sprinkled, remodeling advance, that would need to be sprinkled as well. And so we're able to get water to the building easily enough because we can tie into the city system. Any other questions on the use of the advance site?
I had one question. You were talking about the $4 to $5 million to renovate. the Vance, but then you said something about 3 million. Was that for if you demolish and then build another building, is that what?
Yeah, based on some smaller estimates. we got
Single-story
now.
building versus a.
So you think it would be
modeling of
3 million?
floors.
I guess for the same square footage of area or what we need maybe?
So that's the one disadvantage, is Vance being a basement and 2 stories, we have 4,000 square feet on the floor.
Yeah.
It's more than that, it's almost like 5. So you got about 15,000 square feet of area in Vance. And so by putting an elevator, which does bear a cost, I mean, you're putting in about, between the time you do that, you know, you're putting about $200,000, $300,000 in for an elevator into that, but then you get about 15,000 square feet of space. If we try and build a 15,000 square foot building, it's gonna be about 3 times the size of that, and we don't quite have that space on the site, if you're gonna build it all as 1 story. The one disadvantage to the site here at Vance is here in the back, it slopes dramatically down to the Coke building. And so on our site plan, we're believing we can work with that, because we're putting parking back there and the driveway would slope down to that. And I think we talked about kind of contouring that to make the contour work a little better to us as well. One thing that was also discussed is, could we have a future storage building here on the site? And so if you look on the upper right-hand corner, we found an area where we can say that's where we could put the number that was thrown out, we put a 40 by 60 pole barn up. So we got space, we can do that. And again, you know, we have a plan we're showing here. In the future, in the next stage, when you start to get into the actual building drawings, we can tweak this if necessary. We're also showing on the site plan area for future growth, because that was one of our things to look at. No, we're gonna have a site, let's make sure there's room to grow if we need to. And so we do have space for that as well. Sean? Jump in, feel free to anytime.
Okay. Yeah, I think that was one of the things that I think I brought up early on. Some of our jail projects are built to a need. You guys spent the money to do a needs assessment report. We talked about future growth, and it would be a bad effort on our part not to assign the area for future growth on the jail. So you do have some large green space to the north there that we're showing to be utilized in the future for growth. That could be used for other things in the interim, but in the long run, that's the master plan, was that's where the growth of that jail would have to occur. You can't go to the east or west in this situation, you gotta go north.
And I should point out the driveways that we're reusing. So the driveway you see here just north of the house is the driveway you see on the west side of the property. And then the property's got a funny line to it. So the house is very rectangular like this, the property, the blue boundary. The Coke building actually has a driveway access easement, comes all the way over here to Central. So the property comes like this, and then the property line goes up, and then it kind of tapers over. So that's why it's that kind of funny triangular shape you see in the gray outline of the site. And so the driveway we're going to reuse to get onto Main Street is actually the south driveway that came out of the building. So with the Coke building being torn down, these 2 driveways get connected like that. And that's how we're able to get access from one side of the site to the other. As far as the Coca-Cola building is concerned, we did walk through that with several other county board members. And that building, unlike the Vance building, has not been maintained very well. There would be more than putting a roof on, and the budget we had shot you for re-roofing, we'd also included some extra money in there for doing masonry repairs, but the type of masonry repairs that need to be done to that building are more structural in nature, and so we feel that's going to be something that would be more expensive to do. It's definitely not in good shape, so if you had to ask Sean and I if we had to remodel a building or demolish a building, both of us believe Vance is in good condition. It's good to remodel. The Coca-Cola building, it could be, but you're investing some significant funds into a much smaller building. that, I mean, it would be great to have a storage building like that, you can pull vehicles in, but based upon your building needs, in some respects, the county needs more office space, and then you need like space for vehicle storage. So that's why we feel that Vance, you know, in its pretty good condition, is actually one that can be the most useful to you rather than tearing it down and remodeling it, or tearing it down and building a new facility. Other questions? And so for the budget portion of it, I have that here. So the budget pretty much remains where we had presented it last time. We were asked to be right in about the $16 million range. And we had done some tweaking to go around to shrink out some of the kitchen area, which we've done on the floor plan, and Sean's going to talk about that. The overall square footage of this is still about the same size. When we carved out space from the kitchen, we couldn't necessarily take space out of the overall building at this time just because of the way the building is being configured. And I'll let Sean start to explain that. But right now, based upon the numbers that we have, including contingency, we believe that we can be doing both the construction of the jail and also remodeling of Vance on here and be able to, make sure I read this correctly. This cost includes acquisition of the property for the house and the demolition for the house. It includes acquiring the Coke building, and we had a Coke building remodel in here that we're gonna sub that out for the demolition of the Coke building, so that part reduces, and then also acquisition for Vance is where this came out to be. So we're still right in that budget range of where you need to be, and even in the next phase of the project, when you start to actually doing the final design, you know, our recommendation is to, what you're planning to do your RFQ for your architect, and then go out and have your architect help you select the construction manager. And we believe a construction manager would be a good delivery model on this project, because in construction management delivery for projects, I got 2 construction management companies in here, so let's see if I can fumble this as an architect talking about it. But they assist with pre-design services. They get very involved in budgeting on the upfront part of the project. And with the way prices are right now, we feel that a construction manager style delivery would be very beneficial to the county and to the architect, because that allows us to talk through a lot of different scenarios. Sean will explain when he gets up to do his part of the presentation. He's got several projects right now for county jails that they're in that budgeting phase, and he's working with some construction managers. And they're able to go through a lot of different scenarios of how different construction types can actually affect the budget and actually help them get to budget ranges as prices are going up. And so by getting some of that direct input from a construction manager, we feel it can be very productive and help us maintain budget, but also maintain schedule. Because we do understand that with the bond process that you're looking at, you know, the bond companies are wanting you to be able to expend a certain amount of funds within about 3 years. And so by using your architect to start working through design and then working with the construction manager, we feel it's very possible to get to, I believe, 80% in 3 years, something to that effect. And they're willing to be a little lenient in case there's a delay due to, you know, some natural disaster or so forth. So with a 1-year design process, with the architect and engineer working on this, and then probably 1.5 to 2 years for construction, we can get into that point where we're expending about 80% of those fees by the time your 3 years is up. And so it's, and that's assuming a linear process with design decision making. We select a site, we have the building, and we work through that. There's still a little bit of room in that schedule that if a different site selection were to be brought up, that can be done. But we gotta make sure we're also being disciplined on that as well, because once we start that path, we gotta continue to maintain that path. So one of those ways we feel we can actually get to having more of those funds spent before the end of 3 years and have a shorter construction period that Klinger and HMN had proposed is if we were able to lock in on the building design and the site design, we can actually release we call a site development package earlier in the process. And this is where a construction manager really plays key into that aspect. With the construction manager selected and in place, they're able to help awarding the contracts for subcontractors, and we can break that up into chunks. So construction manager stays involved in all the different projects that are occurring, and we can do a site improvement package where we could go out, do demolition, site improvements, have all that site-related work done, utilities, even if you wanted to, foundations, so that way when the building package is ready to be built and bid out, there's all that work already completed. So that saves on time, your schedule. It can also help you with that funding window that you need to be able to expend to. The one challenge to that is if we actually start to include foundation work in that, we gotta make sure that building doesn't change. But with the amount of work that can be done just from the site improvements alone, on any site, that can definitely be very conducive. And the reason the construction manager can play a critical role in that, if we did a traditional delivery process of architect design, then architect bids out the project to competitive general contractors, that means anyone can bid on the project. So if we did site work and competitively bid that out, hard bidding is what they call it, you could have a general contractor that wins that project, and then we go to bid out the building project. Again, that's competitively bid with no continuity between the two, and it could be won by a different general contractor. And if something doesn't go well, those two general contractors can point fingers at each other. By having a construction manager on board in the process, they are the key construction advisor. They stay involved in the entire process, no matter how many different packages you release for bidding. So the site package, a bidding package for the building, that can even be broken up into different parts. It's the same construction manager for continuity. And so that would be very advantageous for the county. We have a couple projects that we're doing that right now, even at Klinger, and the construction manager, because we knew roofing was going up right now, so we were able to get a roofing package out early, just for the sake of getting those materials ordered with their long lead times and their cost and so forth. So, I've been talking quite a bit, I'm gonna give Sean a chance.
Quite.
Come on, yeah, go ahead.
Question. So, based on this here, we're looking at a budget of 16 million.
Mhm.
Okay, and then when we actually, once it's designed, we take it out to bids, and these companies come back and it comes back at 20 million, which obviously we cannot afford.
Right.
Then what do we do,
Well, hopefully we never get to that point, because during the design process, we're gonna be doing budgeting early on.
Okay.
Particularly with a construction manager on board, at the early percentages, we're looking at, okay, here's what we're designing, how much does this cost?
Mhm.
So those are checks to see, are we still in line with the
Mhm.
budget?
Okay.
And because the construction managers have, through their contractor network, have the ability to talk to a lot of trades and say,
Mhm.
do you hear prices are going up? What do you know? We're able to, because we want to be able to work with a contingency. Now, obviously, we're not going to throw a $14 million or a $4 million contingency into this
Right.
project, but
Mhm.
we want to be working that. And if it's the architect and the engineer alone doing it, and design, bid, build, we can do that, but we don't do that quite as effectively because we don't have all the contractor contacts
Right.
that a construction manager does. And that's just being a humble architect to that.
Mhm.
Construction managers, because they're building things every day, they got better access to cost data than what architects and engineers do.
So if it comes in 20 million, can this be changed to, say, reflect that
So
increase?
in
Like
the
take
early
something-
part of the
take
process, if
something
we're,
out.
I'm gonna say if it comes in at 20 million, but this is early in the process, we can identify, okay, it's because of, what's the reason? Is it because of the type of construction we're looking at? And Sean can talk about, the different types of concrete panels they're looking at right now. If we change the construction pieces for the building, does that help us get into budget? We can look at those types of things. The other part is, at some point in time, okay, if the building square foot cost is too much right now, what do we need to take out of the building to get that cost down? There's a first appearance courtroom that's in here, which is definitely a very good thing to have, but it's not necessarily a necessity, so we can start to look how we can squeeze certain things out of this. Now, that also means that whatever gets squeezed out of it might have to be replicated somewhere else. So if you take, courthouse has already got a courtroom, so you can take out the courtroom, you still got a courtroom function. If you start to take out dispatch, dispatch has got to go somewhere. So you got to look at those, and wherever they go or where they're at, there's going to be some cost in there. And so again, a construction manager working with an architect early in the process, we can start to identify those things and be able to make sure we're staying in budget throughout.
I think everybody should understand these facilities have very little finishes. It becomes a painful process when you start talking about removing chunks of square footage, because there's just not a lot of, we don't have as many chips to trade as we would on an office building, material-wise, or in terms of construction types. I mean, this does require a certain level of construction quality to hold people like this in. So when we talk about that, that's why I like having a CM on board very early, so we can actually sit down and go through this. They got their ear to the rail on a lot more stuff than I do. I will tell you that I'm in the process of trying to remove square footage from a project right now. They got caught up in the bid process as things have gotten kind of out of hand recently. So, yeah.
The $11,897,000 there as the total. That includes the 18 million, or 1.8 million for the roof and other things.
Right.
So immediately you're looking at 10,100,000. And that would put you roughly at 14.3, okay? And I think we need to think creatively. I mean, we may have to look at some of our facilities now. In other words, in relationship to the jail and the sheriff's office. There are ways that we can achieve our goals, and the architect and the construction manager can help us do that.
And, yeah, to that point, if you decide to keep something in place that you currently have, like dispatch, which is already set up, that can be done, but, there might be still some cost involved for some remodeling, but if you choose to, it's tied to the existing jail. And Sean can attest, trying to demolish and remodel in the hardened portion of the existing jail, that gets to be very expensive, because that was built to be not to take apart easily. It's not like Clint Eastwood trying to get out of Alcatraz. It's not gonna be quite that easy.
Everything we try to do is not gonna be, where you gain one way, you lose another. I mean, it's like a giant board of chess.
Mhm.
The other thing is, most of the acquisition would be done by our general fund. It would not be included in the bonds. That way we'd have some flexibility, and we wouldn't violate any bond codicils that require us to use functions for public safety only.
With the kitchen, are we talking about fixing food in place instead of bringing it over from Terre like we do now?
What I did based on our last meeting is I turned this into more of a warming kitchen and cut the square footage down. But we also talked about not totally eliminating the medical, but taking a large portion of medical out. And so, I don't know if we've got this latest plan up here that we can pop up, but we did add in some of that square footage that we pulled out of the kitchen, added a small medical area with a holding cell, so you can isolate somebody that could be potential, contagious. We're testing for whatever pathogen they might have. So,
There we go.
yeah, so you can see the kitchen narrowed up. That's, you're gonna be bringing food in, you're gonna prep, and you're still gonna be required by the state of Illinois to have a triple sink dishwash area, that even if there's just using
And the
styrofoam.
hand wash and all
Yeah,
that stuff.
all that hand wash sink and all that. So that, I left room for all that in that area. Obviously some storage, freezer cooler storage, and then I just recouped that one end and just made storage because we just never seem to have enough storage in the building and put it off that sally port. As you can see, as you move further north in this, we moved the laundry down slightly, and laundry still has the ability to put 4 machines in. Typically, I would put 1 washer, 1 dryer in this situation. The dryer always seems to be the pinch point on getting stuff done in a facility because it takes longer to dry than to wash. So I almost always show 2 dryers, 1 washer, but we've got the ability to put in a second washer. And then you'll see the medical area I moved in. We talked about this in a meeting several weeks ago, how we were going to handle sliding some of the medical from where the EOC ESDA area was over to that area. And that was the solution to that. That gives us a cell, and then we still maintained our property off of the booking desk. And we got the jailer's office, takes up a large portion of what was a large, probably too big of a booking desk. They still have access to view the sally port as they move people out of the booking area and into their housing pod. We do have, and this goes back to when we did our programming with the sheriff and the jailer. We've got multiple holding cells and 2 padded cells in this design. For 48 beds is what I'm showing right now. That's probably more than enough in holding. That might actually be a large holding area for a jail of that size. But we do have this thing drawn so that the 2 shell areas would add another 12 beds, I believe it is, on both sides. Actually, I think it's 10. If you use cells, we could do a little bit more if we did dorm space. So right now we're showing 68 beds because I'm counting them as hard cells and not dorm space.
So this portion where Sean's talking about is, this is the hardened jail with the actual build right away to get to
48, 12 each.
And then these 2 wings here can be finished out for shell space. You could use it as a dormitory style, large open area.
Yes, which I think, that's where we could gain a couple of beds. Understanding that 1 shower per 12, I try to kind of keep it in that range so we can limit the amount of utilities that go into those spaces.
Sean, no matter what, those will have utilities
Yes,
roughed in.
we need to have utilities roughed into those spaces.
Right, okay.
And that would probably require me to do a simple layout on how I do the toilets and the shower and stuff, and we would probably show those in construction documents as dashed in future edition stuff. Other than, so the left side, the booking side, was where we made quite a few of the changes that we talked about the last time we were out on the job site, and then we met in here. The other thing that changed is the organization of the east side of the plan, and there wasn't a lot of changes. A lot of things were kept in place. We kept the hearing room in the judge's office. We kept the one entrance down on that end that allows for bail bondsmen, attorneys, those people to go there, and it's also a release area from the jail if somebody bails out. We moved the squad room back to that area, and based on turning this plan the 90 degrees that we did, and if you look at the site plan that we gave you, this allows us to utilize that staff parking to the north of the Vance building, and that gives us the ability to bring staff in that location, and then it puts our public entrance closer to the public parking. I think it works out just a little bit better.
So this, what Sean's talking about here is north of Vance, or if you choose to build a different building there, you have staff parking here for both your government building and your jail, away from regular public parking down here with its own driveway access.
The bail bondsman's gonna have to walk a little bit, but that's fine, and we can adjust sidewalks and whatnot. I also allowed for a little bit of parking, for staff and patrol, over on the west side by Central, because I just don't think we're going to be able to house everybody we need in that, that secure parking area to the north of Vance.
Sally Port is here on the west side of Vance, so you come drive in, you can either get to the patrol parking or drive right into the Sally Port and then come out here, because there's actually 2 driveways here on that.
Which we will need to do a curb cut in that location on Central. You can come in off Main Street and get back to that same location. So on the, we were talking about the east side of the building, we changed the front lobby a little bit, addressed that public parking area. I think it makes a better presentation to your public, which is important, I think, and in terms of making this building something that they will want to utilize. And I think a lot of people look at it, at the jail as a scary place, but the sheriff's department shouldn't be. They should be able to go and meet with the sheriff or staff, take care of their business, and it should be a good experience. And I think this does that in a better way than it was previously. We also want to make sure that we keep some separation and circulation paths. I don't necessarily need staff and public all going in the same location. Sometimes, and we've got an ex-sheriff in here, sometimes we also need, call it the snitch walk, or we need a place for somebody to be able to go in there and talk to somebody in an interview room that doesn't need to see, it does not need everybody seeing where they're going in at and who they're talking with. So this gives you a little bit of an idea of the what we're thinking in terms of what the look of this could be. Now, I used the red brick because we've talked about remodeling the Vance building. I know we've now talked about tearing down the Vance building. I wanted something in this design to kind of tie back to that. So the thought was we could use some limestone or cast stone seals and the red brick to kind of tie back into that existing building. And there is also an access into the Vance building on the west elevation, so to some degree I wanted that grass space to also become kind of a more pleasant place for the people going in and out of Vance also to be able to utilize. And I thought we could clean that elevation up just a little bit on the jail and make it a little less like a giant drive-in theater with a big precast panel wall right there.
So as far as, the presentation, that's kind of, the documents we're going to present today, the updated floor plan, the site plan, which we have not seen yet, and then the budget. And we know the budget, there's some items in there such as the Coke re-roof that can come out and that can drop us down, depending upon how the county would like to proceed with Vance. We have a number for what it would be to remodel that, and if you choose to do a new construction, what that number would be. So we'll be able to work with you to finalize that budget report, so that way when we send it on to Coles County, because it's my understanding the board would still like to, even though you have the bond available to you, still do the Coles County USDA submission as backup in case something were to come up.
Or some combination,
Or
yes.
some combination
Yes.
thereof. So we'll be doing a final tweak here to the budgetary number. As far as the floor plan, we kind of have a conversation that we need to, not keep wanting to change the floor plan, because the more changes we keep making to the floor plan, the longer it drags out the process. And we understand you have an urgency to get started on the next stage of the process because you want to be able to do things before costs get too crazy.
And your submission to Coles will be later on this week or thereabouts.
Yeah, I think with,
We had to draw a line in the sand and say, okay, here's what we can put forward and we can modify later.
and so the intent is we're gonna give the complete package to Coles, and you guys have been getting parts of it along. We're gonna give that complete package to them, with the suggestions for the budgetary and so forth. And then they'll be looking through that and letting us know what we need to tweak for them to submit for USDA. Based upon both of our companies' experience doing USDA reports, we don't anticipate a lot of tweaks, but we want to make sure we get this into their hands early, because I think there's a staff change that's occurred there. The staff liaison assigned to us has stepped down, and we want to make sure we get this to them so they can start doing their portion of it. So I guess in some respects, from Klinger and HMM's point of view, like I said earlier, originally we were supposed to be kind of all wrapped up in August. We understood your urgency to move a little quicker. So, and we picked up 2 other properties to evaluate, and we're still trying to get things out to you here quickly, because we want to keep with that momentum, because we know you have been a very good partner for us to work with, and we understand you still need to do an RFQ here for the next round. When I talk the next phase, that's when you'll be doing your RFQ to select an architect and then get into the final design of the project. We certainly would like to continue working with you to do that, so we've been trying to aggressively work this to meet your needs at the same time.
It's much appreciated. Andy?
I'm just curious. These are all construction costs. Somewhere in these costs, are there included equipment, desks, computers, all that stuff?
So
Is
we
that
do
all
have a
part of
breakout.
this?
If you look down at the bottom, we have the architectural fees in here, the general conditions, and then what's called FF&E is,
Furniture, fixtures, equipment.
Okay.
yeah, thanks, I was drawing a blank for a second. Been a little tongue-tied.
So-
It's kind of low to me. But
Well, your detention equipment that's fixed to the walls and stuff is in the building.
it's in the, okay,
cost.
okay.
So fairly or unfairly, I used to say if you could pick the building up and shake it upside down, the stuff that stayed bolted in, that's part of what the construction cost is. That
Okay.
was the stuff that should
Okay.
That's not always 100% accurate, but that's kind of a good kind of rule of thumb on that stuff. Obviously, if you grow, we might have needs for new desks, new trash cans, they might need more belly chains, they need more handcuffs. There's things like that that we would probably need to look at that number again. What I've done is, when you look at those numbers, the square footage costs, we're already a month old, or maybe a little over a month old with those numbers. That very well could have changed already.
Okay.
So I put in some escalation built into those square footage numbers. I also have an escalation factor in this as well, trying to anticipate some of this stuff to carry you a little further down the road. Again, that's where CNs come into play and can help us out on some of this stuff. I've seen a larger facility, sometimes there's some economies of scale, and you get a little bit better numbers on some of the bigger projects. Some of the small, I've done some small rural stuff where that number pushes pretty hard, and we're on the very high end of some of those numbers. So also, fewer people to bid it, fewer subcontractors to work on it. These are very specific. There's a lot of masonry, precast. Right now we use a lot of steel joists in these things, and I'm looking for solutions to those issues right now.
Yeah, there's almost 900,000 in escalation costs. You're already building. And then Sean mentioned we could go to IKEA over
Y'all need to get some X wrenches and
Yeah, I was gonna say.
adjustment wrench and a few other things.
Done that before.
Spend some late nights there, put together some IKEA bunks and stuff.
Putting the kids' Christmas presents together.
Yeah, exactly.
And talking about the budget, I was reading the Terre Haute paper the other day on the Lycoming County Jail, and just off the top of my head, I think the budget last year for the sheriff's, or for maybe just corrections, anyway, it said 6.7 or 6.8 million, but the sheriff for this new, since they're getting ready to move into the new jail, he's requesting 8.2 million. So there's like 1.25 million more dollars he's needing to operate this new jail. So that's something. Yeah.
Well, I will tell you, a lot of people, their opinion is I'm moving into a new building, I'm not gonna bring my old junk in.
I get that.
But a lot of it,
Yeah.
I think a lot of his cost is personnel. They've got the
Sure.
lawsuit going on over
Yeah.
there. Federal judge is overseeing it, and, they have to, I don't know, 60 or 80 employees total. And, you know, along with that, when we had a meeting a week or two ago with the sheriff and the chief deputy and the jail administrator, they told us that with this new jail, they're gonna need 3 people on every shift.
Of course, they did say they were gonna revisit that.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we
Here's an
designed this
article.
we designed this as a single post facility,
Right.
but you've got shifts.
Right.
And you've got,
Yeah.
you know, vacation
Yeah, I know.
and sick leave and all that
Yeah.
thing factors into that. So, and then they need, you know, we typically talk about a person in the control center plus rover, and then, you know, so that, yeah, there's some staffing things that we can sit down and go over and
Right.
look at.
But I've been talking to the vice chairman of Jasper County, which is down in Newton, and within the next 30 days, they're gonna be moving into their new jail. And of course, it's a smaller county than ours, but it's, I think he said 25 to 30 beds, but it's designed, you know, the cell area is similar to what you got designed. And, but they're just have 5, they currently have 5, well, they don't, 5 jailers, but with the new jail, that's all they're gonna have is 5. And their costs for the facility with dispatch offices and the jail part is $4 million. And they didn't borrow a dime because they knew that they were going to be building it, and they set money back. And when the time comes, they had the money, they didn't have to borrow money. Like, we're basically borrowing a majority of it.
I just put an article on Urbana and the Champaign County
Right.
issues. And I mean, that's very interesting to take a look at. I mean, we're gonna try to be right in the middle, not borrow maybe everything, but,
Majority of it.
yeah.
Right.
And early on with the programming, we sat down with the sheriff, and, you know, some of the board members were part of that too.
Mhm.
Staffing was discussed, you know, are they gonna need to add staff? So hopefully we've had a good conversation on that, so that way we don't get caught later on where now they feel they gotta add more staff.
No. But we haven't got that resolved yet.
No, we
Okay.
do not, but
Yeah,
I mean,
Sure.
But when they threw that out, because we talked a month or so ago, and they were talking maybe day shift, evening, have 3 and 2 on midnights, and then last week they said, no, we gotta have 3, and that's third. You know, I know how shifts work, I've done it, and they'll need 13. If they want 3 on every shift, they're gonna have 13 full-time employees. Currently, we have 8. So 5 more employees, that's another $250,000.
right,
Where's the money coming from?
and that's what we said. I mean,
Right. Yeah,
that money is not forthcoming.
Yeah.
That's-
So, I mean, that's something we
Oh, yeah,
gotta get resolved.
Yeah, so
Well,
what
if
we
we-
would advise, you know, hopefully we're the architect would be on those phase, and if not, you know, whoever the architect is, you wanna make sure that that's an early discussion, okay?
Right.
Here's what we can staff, so here's the size we have to build to, or how do we accommodate this, you know? I mean, John's created a very efficient design for you that can help minimize staffing, but it's a certain point too where you still have to have staff to do
Right.
things.
Yeah. You can build to a need and take care of your own, and that is where we would talk about how you can minimize staff, and then you wanna look to the future growth and utilize those beds until you fill them. You know, there's some revenue, but it's not guaranteed revenue at that point in time that you can use towards those kind of needs. But again, you're not gonna get a written contract from a county saying, I'm gonna get, unless you did this regional, if this regional thing actually occurred and there was multiple counties that are helping take care of some of those bills. But I'm not seeing that based on anything that we're doing right now.
problem with that scenario though is you're still gonna trust the state of Illinois. And that's not gonna happen anytime soon right away. We're still arguing about nickels and dimes to them, and we're not getting anywhere. So,
It's kind of interesting in some other states to the west, they a lot of times incorporate their dispatch right into their control room. And I basically save myself a person.
Right, and that was in the conversation I had down in Jasper County. He said that with the dispatch, they're gonna be trained, and they can have control. So, you know, you don't have to have one person sitting in the control room that he can't leave, you know. The dispatch can run open doors and this and that, and I think you can, there's no way we need 3 people on full-time, not when you have 2, a lot of times 2 dispatchers in there that they can act as,
Can one dispatcher be in the control room and one,
well, I don't, now, like down there, and I asked if we could come and have a tour of the place, and he said, you're more than welcome to, and we'd be glad to show you what we're doing, even though it's a little smaller scale than what we're talking here, but still, it's the same concept.
sure,
But I think, he said the dispatch is gonna be separate, but they have the cameras, they have the capability of running the controls from the dispatch versus have to actually be in the control room.
so it could save you your night shift,
Right.
or close to it.
Right. So,
In the process of, we've moved people into the housing area of 150 bed jail down in Bloomfield, Missouri, and it's kind of interesting. They run that 150 beds with 2 people in control because they found out running perimeter doors and interior doors it required 2 people because they were just wearing out the one person. And then they've got one person that does the rover, so they run 3. But I will tell you that the jailer spends more of his time out of his office and in the control room than he does. So he relieves quite a bit for, you know, bathroom breaks or lunch or whatever. I think what you'll find is that some of that happens. Now, that ends at probably 5 o'clock at night because that person goes home. So the evening shift is the one where I think you find that. But then, you know, for a good part of that time, they're locked in their cell and it's much less. Then you're really counting on your rover doing watch tour, making sure everybody's where they're supposed to be. So,
Anybody else have any questions at this point?
So I guess in, summary, we're kind of presenting our final things for you to make any final decisions on, like what you do with Vance, so we can submit that off to Coles County on your behalf. And again, I don't want you to feel like we're cutting you off on wanting to do more design changes, but we also know that draws out your process, and you're really eager to get going too, so we're trying to help facilitate that.
I'd be correct in saying we're about ready to move from phase 1 to phase 2.
Mhm. And even in site selection, one of the reasons we think it's important to do architect selection first and then construction manager, because architect's always I got construction managers in the room, they always like to refer it the other way, but in our world, we like to think, we're working with you on the design all the way through, particularly if you're looking at potentially selecting a different site. Have that design part done early as you're selecting your CM. You're able to get some of that work done, or if you do it reverse, you're losing a little bit of time. So I think in the schedule that Sean and I have proposed to you for the design time, there's still time in the next phase, phase 2, if you will, construction documents to nail down a site. We have design information we're getting ready to share over to Josh here at the county to go. If you look at another site, what your typical utility usages would be, so that way you can determine, where those needs are at. So we have that getting ready to go over, and we can be looking at another site, but that will need to be done into the next phase because we've got to be able to get something into Coles County's hands.
Correct.
And so we want to make sure we're fulfilling that agreement, because that's kind of a shared agreement the 2 of you had with Coles County and so forth. So we want to make sure we do our part to help you complete that portion of the project.
Thank you. Courthouse.
Yes.
Would you tell the board what you?
So we have numbers in for the courthouse roof replacement and the budgetary numbers, and the range came in between 1.2 to 1.7. And we had 2 notable historic roofers involved. So the courthouse roof is not like re-roofing a house. It's a large, it's complex, and it's slate, and so you need to have a roofer that understands working on these old buildings rather than roofing a house. So the 2 roofers that have presented, both who do buildings like this, they actually had about a $400,000 difference between the 2. And So we have those numbers to share with you as well, and I can forward that to you. I'll send it to Josh. And so we have that ready for you. Now, when you had numbers done previously, several years ago, you had a number that was like 500,000, which I always thought was like way low. And then you have one that was like 1.1. So my gut feeling is that we're probably, 1.2 doesn't surprise me. I think that feels like that's about where it should be. With the way prices are going, I can see it going. 1.7 to me seems a little bit on the high end, but it's a crazy world right now with construction costs. I'm sure construction managers in this room are very well aware of that. So I can see us, and that was also going to be potentially also a process where we get into that design, do a little more pre-design, and then do another budget update with it as well to make sure we're staying in that target range.
It's on the agenda to go ahead and do the final bid documents
Okay.
and to approve going out for bid. Now, whether the
All right.
board will go along with that, but we kind of said that we needed to move on that
Mhm.
so that we can get a bid award this year so they can start out of the box next year.
Right.
And the timing's good. I mean, timing's not good, but if we're gonna do it,
Mhm.
the timing's more advantageous to do it the way we're gonna do it.
And we had presented, to go back with slate shingles like they are,
Right.
reusing those slate shingles. And then there was also an alternate, we could do composite type shingle that could go up there. And so that could produce a little bit of cost savings to you.
Well, I thought you were gonna say something.
Nope.
I can't put metal up, just metal.
Oh, we could.
You
we
could.
Put asphalt shingles too.
Well, those will last a long time.
Right.
Those are the only shingles that last a long time. Metal would definitely change the look of the building. As an architect, I'm cringing inside.
Okay.
I'm still trying to smile outside.
I'm not sure we can get away with that.
You know,
Because it is
you got a,
historical.
you got a historic status on the building. Metal kind of creates some of its own interesting, and actually part of it is metal up there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there is metal.
Which is odd. So I think at some point in time, the roof had been modified in such a way, so we're trying to work through that. There's masonry, it's not just roof work, there's masonry work that needs to be done. Part of some of the leaks you're experiencing is because the stone joints are open. The ones that face up to the sky are open, so you got water coming in that way.
There it is.
And we start to take,
That'd look good in metal, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we're also gonna put a spire and a big rose window in.
It
No,
doesn't
sorry.
look like that right now, if you recall.
So, no, it's, well, they've been working on
Yeah.
the church, but going back to your lovely old building, it has some masonry work that needs, and a lot of that roofing is tucked into the masonry, because that's how you detail it to make it weather tight. So a mason needs to be involved to take that apart. We're planning on replacing all the gutters, all the downspouts. Now, some of those are the original gutters and downspouts, or at least maybe a 50-year replacement of one of those. They're old. And then you got some downspouts that are relatively residential, so we're planning to go back, replace everything of the proper size, because I believe in some cases the downspouts are actually too small. And so we have that information. Now, this does not include touching anything on your tower. There's metal panels up there. The main emphasis was we gotta get a dry roof. So that's where the money's going into. We're not doing any work going up the tower at this time. Just for the nature of the building, a big chunk of the cost is going to be how do the contractors get up there and do their work, whether it's by scaffold or by lifts. They're significant, and even when they're up there working, they got to tie off. How do they tie off? There's a lot of just bulk cost into this besides just roofing numbers that go into it to safely do it, so that way we don't have an accident on hand.
Thank you, Michael.
No problem. It's a pleasure to see all of you.
There is one section on that, and I'm trying to think of where it is, but that it's asphalt roof on there.
Yeah, as you go up the tower, so we're taking care of all the roof areas. So as you go up the tower, there's these little kind of roof areas going up.
That are asphalt.
That are asphalt.
that-
And so what we did at this time is we're calling those out to replace them the way
Okay.
they are.
Okay.
So we figured there must have been a reason why they put it that way. And that could be something in the next phase, if you wanna look at that in terms of, and it could be maybe because some of that slate had fallen off. There is the red slate still available. And I know you guys have some pieces that have been picked up off the ground, which is kind of concerning because that means it came off the building somewhere. So we can, I mean, slate lasts an incredibly long time.
Right.
You got a little bit more cost because you gotta be able to, if you wanna be able to reuse it, you gotta take it off carefully. But, I mean, it's a long, I mean, some of that slate, I would guess is probably original. It's been there 100-some years and still doing the job. So, all right, well, thank you all. It was great to see you again.
Okay. Here's for this side of the table. Here's for this side of the table. Oh, you didn't? Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Have you got anywhere to attach these? They're not staying. Oh, yes, they are. I'm sorry.
I thought I had. Sorry.
This side of the table.
Good to see you, Mark. Take care.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
There you go. You got enough over there?
Yeah, we did, we got it.
Good.
I just gave you that one.
We do have 2 copies of the full-size drawings for you, the plan and the site plan, so it's right there in Keelis.
I'll put it here.
All right.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Yes.
Is he leaving?
No, they're gonna meet out at, they're gonna have lunch out at Mary Jane's. Okay, can I draw your attention to 49? And they're trying to get in here, page 49 of the big document. Because I think everybody always wants to know, this is the final audit that has to be passed before we take any action on the bonds. But I thought I'd highlight a couple of things. They're gonna try to get here, but they will eventually get here to go over everything. The other copy that you have, or this one, is their letter of recommendations and just talking about us in general, okay? I bring, okay. On 49, if you look at the top numbers, 1.2, 680, 78, 211, all of the pension plans, those are credits, so those are all good. We're $2,090,000 to the good in our pension plans. And they say we're doing excellent. So I wanted to make sure everybody knew where we were on the pension plans. Then if you go to page, we can talk about more things, but one of the things I want to make sure of is a couple of things. On page 60, the fund balance for the year is $586,121 to the good. And that is after they transferred all the safety tax into a special fund, and there's $371,000 to the good in the safety tax. So you add the two together and you're about $977,000 in surplus for the year. Okay? Now, there's a lot of other issues in here, a lot of other information, but I just thought I'd highlight those two things because those seem to be one of the things. Yes?
Tell me again what this is.
Okay. That's a combination of $586,000 and the fund balance of let me see if I've got that here. I've got to find it, the page. I'll get there. 198. There's $357,000 remaining as of November 30th, 21. So you add those together, and that's what the budget figures on surplus for last year. Thought we could talk about this more. I wanted to get it into your hands. We just got it Friday night, about 5:30. So thought I'd get it into your hands so you can take a look at it, but I knew you would want to know information on what I just gave you.
It's a big change from a few years ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, we cut some breaks. It wasn't all because we're super. It's a combination of both to put ourselves in the right position to have that. Safety tax is running around 114,000 this month we just got in. Some of our funds are doing fairly well. We'll have this document out once it's updated that you get every month, which is the budget. Okay? So are there any initial questions on the budget, on the audit that I might be able to highlight? I've been poring over it for the last few days. Okay. Andy, do you have anything you want to bring up right now?
Just a couple things. Ray called me when we got that rain the other day, and they had water running into the state's attorney's office.
Okay.
And one of the judges, secretary's office too, there's some water running in. I went up there Friday to try to, and Ray had already left, but I'm gonna try to touch bases with him and see, we gotta determine how it's getting in. So,
Okay. We also had a problem with the office over here for the coroner. We're recaulking the windows. We may have to change door types. Remember, it's a pole barn.
right,
And he put carpet in the main office, so.
so
it's
it
not
leaks in.
exactly- Yeah,
You have trouble with windows in metal buildings.
right. Well, they can take care of the
They
window.
can.
Window just fine. I think that's where a lot of it's coming in, but under the door may be more problematic, but they're working on a solution to that. Okay? You want to talk about insurance real quick?
Yeah, I don't have the exact figure, but it basically came back, increase of 4.1, I think, is what it's
$40 a
called.
month for the main plan.
Yeah, and Kurt, I left a message, he was on vacation, but he just called me this morning and said that they had gotten that down to a 2.1% increase.
It's on the agenda, and we'll call Kurt so he
Yeah.
can be there. I thought to give us a jump this year, if it's palatable, the existing one at the full amount would mean about a $2,000 a month increase. If he's cut that in half, that'll give you an idea, but we'll have exact figures for you on
About 1,000.
yeah. So, anyway,
That was
questions?
decent news anyway.
Yeah. Wait for Lisa. You might, we got the insurance bids in, not bids, the renewals. And what did you say?
Originally, it's 4.1% increase, and we called, which in itself is good compared to 33% over a couple of years ago. But I left a message, Kurt got back with me, and he said that they called and they've gotten it down to a 2.1% increase this year, which in the insurance business, I think is pretty decent. So,
Dan, do you have anything?
No, let's go to a meeting on
I think we have a meeting tomorrow, posted on.
Is it?
Window.
Yeah, I didn't have
I didn't realize that either, but it's on the window out there.
Yeah, there's, it's right up there, animal shelter at noon tomorrow.
Okay, yeah, she posted something on the, I don't know,
Carl, do you have? What?
Nope.
Lisa, you wanna talk about the?
Sure. So, with the, what we're gonna look at on Friday, and right now it just includes Augie, Dawn, Ross, and Jeff and me, is taking a look at, some software that can be used for HR and payroll. And my knowledge is from what we use at the hospital, which is ADP, which really has a huge number of features, more than what we would need in a little organization like this. But it's my starting point for reference. So I contacted the person at UCCI, because if you have a question, then she'll put it out. And I've had 3 individuals from different counties return calls. And I had a lengthy conversation with one who loves Paycom, and so that's the one I went out to first. And I've had really positive communications with one of their salespeople, and so we're gonna have a demo, a Zoom call demo with them this Friday. So that you can have all of your HR documents and keep track of your HR needs on there. And then they'll also do most of the processing for payroll. And the woman that I spoke with said she spends less than 3 hours per payroll period, including the day that she's having to go in and proofread. She's got it down to less than 3 hours that she deals with her part of processing payroll. And then the good thing is too, it also has features where every employee can go in, they can access and see all of their pay information, update an address, update beneficiaries, all of that good stuff there. And then also it would have some features for supervisors. If it's like ADP, you can go in and update or change anything that has to do with your staff's hours. And then you can go in and quickly scan through and hit accept, and that's saying that you approve all of their payroll information. So ADP was, once I learned it, it was a breeze, and just in my conversations, it sounds like Paycom is very similar.
And then we received a check for $10,000 for an applicant to go and put in a solar farm north Kansas. A short 40 acres, 33 or 36, something like that. There's a little bit of dispute, and that'll be processed. She's identifying any issues, and then it'll go to your committee, and then we'll go from there.
Or my committee. So we gotta figure out how to do this and what it entails.
But we did get the check, and we are holding it right now, so. All right, we need to go.
I guess I got a question, because I think Aaron brought this up before about this program. What's the purpose of it? To save man hours? Be more efficient?
To get us into the 21st century. when we're all
Versus how we're doing
according
now?
to- Yes.
You're not so much involved in that as Dawn because of the payroll, right?
Well, it would
Well-
be, it's one of his staff members, one of his positions as well would be involved. Or it would take the place of a lot of the time that one of his staff members does
How do we do it now?
manually.
It's all manual?
Yeah, here's how we do it. You hire a new person, and that department head or supervisor informs payroll. But then that person comes to my office, and we enroll them in their various benefits and answer any questions. And then we're the ones that send out the Blue Cross Blue Shield renewal notices and get those back to us in time so that that information can go to payroll. Any terminations that go on, we don't make that decision, but we get that notice and we go in and we do the termination to the various benefits like IMRF and life insurance and health insurance, and make sure that all the money's squared up for that. Every month we do get the payroll report or wage report, and we enter that information into the IMRF system. So we do a lot. We do everything except the payroll. I mean, we all do our own payroll.
So if you get this system, will a lot of that be automatic?
Well, I don't know. I want to hear about it first.
Okay.
But it sounds like it could relieve some,
Okay.
We're
But
also
it-
looking at getting just an HR person
but it's not going to
that
save.
handles
Yeah.
all of that,
Yeah.
rather than Augie sharing, like he's got a deputy who does part of his work and then part of payroll or HR. If we had an HR person,
Okay.
sorry.
So it's not gonna totally take away, you
It's
still
not.
have to set someone up, you still want a face that talks to you.
Well, that's what I was saying, you don't want to have
Right.
a thing on
But
the
it's
computer, in my
it's,
opinion.
right, it's the month to month, the week to week payroll to payroll, that's what,
It's paychecks. That's what's gonna,
Yeah.
it's just that part of it is where it's gonna say Pam and Dawn time.
right.
Okay.
And like your IMRF, that data I foresee would go from the payroll side of it and automated into, so you're not manually.
They're
entering.
working on that now.
Yeah.
In fact, IMRF is, they're not mandating it, but they're pushing it very strongly that needs to be an automated process right out of your payroll
Yeah.
system.
Interesting, okay.
On the agenda, let's see, accept and approve audit. Ordinance providing for the issuance of $10 million worth of bonds at 4.35, 30 years. Authorization of RFQ for architectural services. Presentation of the Coles County is gonna be there to update us on their portion of everything. We've got a couple of conveyances of deeds that people are buying off of us, so they don't show up on the tax rolls like that anymore. Renewal of the health insurance, and I assume that you can get a hold of him and get something
Yeah.
on a permanent basis and take a look at it. We've got some appointments. Second page. More appointments. Borough Marshal has accepted to be on the Housing Authority if we appoint him. The Honeybee wants to use part of the courthouse lawn. Have we got the sheriff approval on that also?
Not yet, but
Okay.
we will.
And then authorize bid documents and advertise for bids on courthouse root system. That's the agenda. Are there any questions about that? We need to go into a brief closed session on land acquisition, okay? So a motion to go into the closed session. Phil moves, Russ seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We will go in briefly, or as soon as we can, as soon as Augie gets us ready.
This ordinance providing the issue, when would this actually?
Okay, we're back into session
Oh,
now.
sorry.
You're fine, go ahead.
Now you can go.
If you want, I know.
So what's the, if, on issue 9 for our agenda, if we approve an ordinance providing the issue of a $10 million general obligation bond, at what point would this all occur and would you
Couple of
actually
weeks.
sign it?
And then you start earning interest on the funds.
The one I don't have it in front of me, I'm gonna read that. One thing I was concerned when I read it yesterday was that basically if the public safety tax money isn't sufficient,
Yeah.
then by doing this, we're saying we're gonna have to levy an additional tax.
Or we can take a state fund and dedicate that to it. In other words, we get a sales tax in, you could supplement it with that. That's why I'm a lot more recommending that we go with 10 million than 14 million or 16 million. I mean, we're
Well, 10
collecting.
million, the safety tax money will cover.
Right. Plus, we'll
Right.
have another 600,000
But
left.
if this all ends up costing us a lot more, then basically we're gonna be taxing the people of Edgar County.
No, you would
Or
not have
stripping.
to use sales or property tax to do that. You could dedicate some other fund to it, that's what it says.
Okay, so what's that other fund?
You could
Anything,
use state
any
income
of it.
tax.
Okay,
Any of
but we're using that to help
rubbing
off.
Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah, right.
But the bond, any
Yeah.
bond issue, you gotta offer them a
Yeah.
way out. But there's more than enough, I mean, sufficient, that's why they say you can't do it if you don't have at least 1.25. In other words, say your bond payment is $1 million, you would have to have 1,250,000 available.
Right.
And we're approaching well, it will be probably 1.4 million.
So basically what this is saying is that we can use all of the safety tax money for it,
Right.
but if we need to add it, there's nothing saying we can't add more to it.
No,
Okay.
but I don't think
Well, I don't, no, we don't.
did we answer your question? Anybody else? Anything else to come before the meeting? Motion to adjourn. Andy moves. Russ seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay.